Hello and welcome to the first of 6 mini tutorials on the Traktor Kontrol S8, the flagship digital DJ controller from Native Instruments for Traktor. You know, I think it's fair to say that this unit is the first mainstream DJ controller that's kind of dared to completely reimagine the way we perform electronic music as DJs. You know, it's got the Traktor's remix decks, which is something that they kind of came up with on their own, built right into it. It's got screens, so you don't have to look at the laptop like we used to do. It's got no jog wheels. Clearly there's no jog wheels there. So unlike something like this, there's kind of no spinny things anymore, which might sound silly, but it's a big change. Why should we be controlling music like we used to control a round piece of vinyl? You know, it's got MIDI built into it, so you can interface really easily with production gear, for instance, but also you can plug all your analog gear into it as well. So I think it's fair to say it's kind of the first digital DJ controller that's really truly wanted to be at the heart of your system, at the heart of the way you perform music in the digital age, whatever gear you're using and however you perform it and however you mix and match all that stuff. It's really exciting and it's inspired a lot of people to kind of go ahead and take the leap. You know, it is, I think again, it's fair to say it's something that a lot of people have been waiting for. But having said that, when you get one of these home and unpacked, and we know this is true because a lot of our readers tell us this is true, it can be an extremely daunting piece of gear, especially if you're used to using CDJs or using vinyl. You know, you're using something now that's very different for the first time from the gear that you've been used to, even if you've been using digital controllers up until this point, because most of them, let's face it, look like shrunk versions of CDJs or a vinyl setup. So it can be daunting, and that's what these little mini videos are all about. In the course of these videos, we're going to look at things like the screens. You know, no need for the laptop to be used anymore, but how do you use the screens on one of these? Things like how to interface with other gear and then how to switch DJs who might be using other gear or even using another laptop. How to use the effects. There's 4 effects engines on here, which is the first time that's appeared on any controller. How to do things like use freeze mode. Freeze mode is a brand new function on Traktor very recently, and this is the first controller to incorporate it. And how to use things like looping. Looping works on the pads and on a special controller here. So there's lots of things I want to look at. But in this first video, I want to start with the very, very basics and look at the transport. How to control your music when there are no jog wheels on there. So let's get stuck in and have a little peek at that. So I have a track loaded on this deck here, and the touch strip lets me scroll through that track, listening to it just like I was scratching through a track on a piece of vinyl or on a CDJ. It even sounds the same. You'll notice it is progressive, and that means I could throw it in the same way I could throw a CDJ or a piece of vinyl. And of course it sounds very similar. It's even possible with a little bit of practice to do a baby scratch on there. So that is incredibly intuitive. You get used to that very quickly. But the touch strip has another big use too, which is by holding shift down, you can move through your track right from the very beginning to the very end, and the little LED lights at the top in blue and in red show you where you are on the track. So it's like a seek mode, like moving the needle through a piece of vinyl. So combining the two, it's absolute child's play to find your starting point, hit a cue. Traktor will actually automatically set the cue for you at the beginning of each tune if you want it to, and then you're ready to play. So we can hit play and get our track playing away there. Now at this point, the touch strip acts like a nudge. So on a piece of vinyl you'd be kind of like very, very gingerly moving it, but on a CDJ you'd be using the outside ring. And that basically lets you speed it up and slow it down. Speeding up a little bit, moving in the direction of the waveform, or slowing it down in order to get it into time with anything else you might be playing, whether it's on another deck or on something external. So nudge mode, again, it's intuitive, it's simple, it's progressive. The more you nudge, the quicker it's going to happen. And it's really something that takes very little time to get used to. Now the other control that we're looking for, of course, is our pitch fader. Where has this little boy gone? Well, actually, he's not gone very far. Let's get that tune playing. Now I'm going to set this tune to the master tune on this deck, and to set it to the master, a very quick, easy way of doing it is to press shift and sync. So we're now set as the master tempo, and there's a big master tempo control right in the middle here, which will let us speed up and slow down in 1/100th of a BPM per click. So not very much. But by holding down shift, it will do it 1 BPM per click, so we can suddenly enact some really big changes to our music. That's for the master tempo. Another place you can do it is by pressing the second button down to the left of the screen, which will give you the master BPM again, and the browse button this time is doing your 100th BPM changes, or by holding shift it's doing your whole BPM changes. But if your sync is not engaged, then the master BPM here, and this isn't the master, this becomes a single BPM for this only, for this deck only. At the moment this deck is set to the master, so it doesn't matter if the sync's engaged or not, but were it not, then this is going to be just for this deck. So if you want to adjust decks separately from each other, that's where to do it from. So these controls, again, they take a little bit of getting used to, not least because you have to hold down a shift button to enact a really fast change, but it's essentially the same as a fader. So now let's look at a couple of other things which are unique to the S8. And the first thing I want to show you is a really simple one. When you're playing a tune, pressing shift and Q drops you straight back to the beginning of that tune. And obviously if you're paused, it'll just leave it paused when you get to the beginning, and if you're playing, it will just play from the beginning. So shift and pause is just another way of holding down shift and moving right to the beginning here. Quite a nice way of doing that. So I've got a top tip now for you, especially if you're coming to this unit from CDJs or vinyl, and that's just a little tweak in the configuration. Because the way it's set up when you get it out of the box is that moving your finger from the left to right will move the waveform faster from the left to right if you're nudging, or if you're paused, it will move you from the beginning to the end of the track, which makes perfect sense if you've never used CDJs or vinyl. But here's the thing, if you're used to using CDJs or vinyl, actually the place where you normally nudge and scratch is not the top half, which would be equivalent to the operation I just showed you on the touch strip, but it's the bottom half. So actually it's inverted. Moving from the left to right on a CDJ is going to move your waveform from the right to left and vice versa. So in order to allow DJs who are used to using CDJs and vinyl to do that, there are two little invert buttons in the Traktor Kontrol S8 settings in the configuration, which just invert that behavior. And now the nudges work exactly as you would expect, and the same with scratch mode. That's taken me backwards through the track, and that's taken me forwards through the track, even though I'm going from right to left to go forwards and left to right to go backwards. So there you go, not as daunting as it might have appeared at the very beginning once you know how. In the next video, we're going to look at these screens. Can't wait to see you for that one.